From Allah.
No, this is what it says. When a matter has been decided, right, so a matter is being decided, a matter is being decided
if the Prophet say,
by Allah and His Messenger.
If the Prophet says,
So why is Muhammad participating in the decision?
Okay. If the Prophet says you have to pray 5 times.
It doesn't say that in the Quran.
I'm telling you an example.
It doesn't say that in the Quran.
Yeah, if the Prophet, so you see, it doesn't say in the Quran. Who said it?
Yeah.
The Prophet. We listen to him.
And what does the Quran say? When a matter is decided by Allah and His Messenger. And he agrees. Because it's not in the Quran, it's what Muhammad said.
You just come, you come inside the hall.
Where does Muhammad say pray 5 times a day?
Because he pray 5 times a day.
Where does Muhammad say that?
In hadith.
In the hadith?
Yes.
All those hadiths from Allah?
Hadith from Rasul.
They're from the Rasul.
Yes.
So that means Muhammad is participating in the decision of Allah.
He doesn't speak for himself. He doesn't speak for himself.
He doesn't speak for himself.
Whatever he speaks is from Allah.
Everything.
Everything.
So when everything. I'm going to prove to you. This is not what he believes.
To me.
Yeah.
Every day you got
Because Muhammad said that the sun sets in a puddle of mud. Was that from Allah?
From Allah. It's not from Allah.
So the sun sets in a puddle of mud.
Everything to do.
in the direction where it's being described.
Other faith.
Okay.
Zero.
So we haven't got an answer.
Zero.
We haven't got an answer.
You're giving me something.
You're saying he doesn't speak for himself.
You jump from one.
So every word, so to be clear, so every word of Muhammad is Allah's words. Is that what you're trying to argue?
Let me finish.
Every word. So every word of the hadith, every single word spoken should be treated as revelation. So why aren't they in the Quran?
To him. Whatever the Prophet says, we have to listen.
Yeah.
He's like God. Not like God, but
He's like God.
The word.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
The
And
word.
why?
The word.
Why?
The word.
Because when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, so He's like God. You said it, not me. You said it, not me.
He tell us to pray 5 times a day. Allah doesn't told us that to pray 5
Allah
times.
didn't tell you.
Yeah.
But Muhammad did.
Through him.
So Allah didn't tell you, but Muhammad did. So that is Muhammad participating. Why does Allah have a partner? That's shirk. Your own Quran testifies to shirk. You have testified to shirk. You said Muhammad is like God. You said Allah didn't say tell us to pray 5 times a day. Muhammad did.
In Islamic tradition, a central claim repeated again and again is that Muhammad never speaks from himself. Every word he utters is viewed as revelation, or at the very least as direct guidance from heaven, which is why the hadith literature is elevated to the status of a second form of revelation with full legal authority. This claim rests on Qur'an 53:3-4, which states that Muhammad does not speak from desire, but speaks only a revelation revealed. In this framework, the voice of Muhammad and the voice of Allah are treated as identical within the realm of religious law. But Surah Al-Ahzab 33:36 overturns that entire assumption. The verse does not say that Allah alone makes decisions. Instead, it explicitly pairs 2 agents within a single legal action, when Allah and His Messenger have decided a matter. In Arabic, this construction is not metaphorical. The particle wa joins 2 distinct subjects as partners in one binding decision. Textually, the Qur'an is not portraying Muhammad as a mere conveyor of Allah's decree, but as someone who jointly determines that decree alongside Allah. Classical commentators link this verse to the marriage of Zainab bint Jahsh, who rejected Muhammad's proposal on behalf of Zayd. At the moment of her refusal, no revelation had been given. The proposal itself was simply Muhammad's personal decision as leader of the community. Only after the rejection did 33:36 descend, rebuking her by declaring that a believer has no choice once Allah and His Messenger have made a decision. The sequence of events strongly suggests that revelation was used to ratify a human decision after the fact, a pattern that stands in tension with the idea of transcendent, pre-existing divine decree. This is why the phrase Allah and His Messenger creates a profound theological problem. If Muhammad's decisions are automatically the decisions of Allah, then mentioning the 2 as separate subjects makes no sense. But if Muhammad possesses independent legislative will, then the Qur'an has effectively placed a human being into a position of shared authority with God. And at this point, within the logic of pure monotheism, elevating a human agent to participate in divine decision-making becomes an act that falls squarely into the category of shirk, assigning a portion of God's exclusive authority to a created being.
Through the Prophet. He told the Prophet some stuff.
This is basic Islam.
This is true Islam, not
Right,
basic.
basic Islam. Pray 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Where is that command in the Quran?
In Prophet.
In the Prophet.
Yeah, yes.
So the Quran is not lying
It's complete.
when it says
Complete.
Muhammad by
The
Allah and His Messenger.
Sunnah complete the Quran, complete. They go together like this.
Where does the
Together.
Quran
Yeah.
tell you to use hadiths?
أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. You have to obey Allah and obey the Rasul.
But the
That's the
Rasul
Quran.
is dead.
No, he was alive.
No,
He was alive.
the hadiths are not the Rasul.
Yeah, but it's written, he told this.
No,
Who said this?
no, the hadiths are a book. They're not the Prophet.
But who said the hadith? The Prophet?
No,
Who?
the
You.
people who made the hadiths up are the ones that told you the hadiths.
How many?
Even your hadith chains say that someone said to someone who said to someone who said to
Because it's
someone.
true. Because it's true.
And how do you know
Otherwise
it's
not
true? How do you know it's
because
true?
you know, I know Muhammad, to me, to him, so we have chain.
No.
The proof.
That's just
That's
a
not
list
the
of
proof. It's
names.
not a list of names.
That doesn't prove
For
anything.
you, for
That
you,
doesn't prove
for
anything.
you. Hey, change. Something
Doesn't-
else. What
No,
else?
we're still on
What
this.
else? What
We're
else?
still on this.
Topic change.
We're still on this.
Topic, man, come on.
Because
Something else.
it
Something
says-
else. This is we going
it
through.
says-
We're going through
Go
this.
on.
it says, and you have agreed,
Done.
Allah and His Prophet make the decisions.
Too little. Something else.
You said shirk.
Something else.
You testified that Allah was like God, that Muhammad was like God.
We don't wanna
We've
talk-
got you on camera, we'll do a flashback.
Yes,
We'll do a flashback.
Whatever the Prophet says, we
Yeah.
have to listen.
Yeah.
He's like God. Not like God, but whatever.
He's like God.
the word.
There you go.
Yeah.
Everyone will
the Prophet
see.
And Allah and the Prophet. We follow Allah.
So where's the
and
hadiths
Prophet.
in that statement? Where's the hadiths in that statement?
أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. You have to obey Allah and obey the Prophet. You have to obey him.
That's not saying hadiths. Where's hadiths?
We obey him. His hadith.
The,
His commandment.
the hadiths are not a person. The hadiths are a book. You're commanded to obey Allah and the Rasul.
Okay, you see this?
The Rasul
Okay, I'm
is
gonna
a
tell.
person.
I'm gonna tell you.
The hadiths
Okay, let me-
are a book.
Let me tell you. The camera now is the videotaping you now, yeah?
Yes.
It's same. People that are videotaping the Prophet and writing his word. Same.
Okay.
And then bring the camera, video
That's
camera.
a lie.
That's a lie now.
I'll tell you why it's a lie.
Why?
Because the first written hadiths appear 100 years after the
It's not
Prophet.
true. It's not true.
Not at the time of the Prophet.
Liar. You're a liar.
So which
You are a liar.
hadith
You are a
book? Which
liar.
hadith book was
You
written
are
at the
a
time of the
liar straight
Prophet?
away.
Which one?
You are a liar.
Which hadith?
You are a liar.
Which hadith
You
book
stop lying.
was written at the
Change
time of the
topic.
Prophet?
Oh, stop lying.
No, no, no.
Change the topic. Oh,
You're
stop
saying
lying.
I'm lying.
Change the
So
topic.
prove it.
Oh, stop lying.
Prove it.
There is not.
Which hadith book was written at the time of the Prophet?
Rubbish.
Which
You're
one?
talking rubbish.
Which one?
You are talking rubbish.
You see, he doesn't have one.
No.
And I'll tell you why he doesn't have one. Because there was never any book written at the time of the Prophet apart from what became the Quran.
Sahaba, yeah.
It was the hadith
Even the Qur'an
were written down
It was pulled down.
over 100 years later.
True.
And the big collections of the hadith,
2000.
the first ever written hadiths were written 100 years after the Prophet. They were traced back to one person, and there was less than 100 hadiths in that compilation, if memory serves me correct.
Your memory.
Fast forward another 100 years, and then you get 5,000 hadiths going back to that same person. Now I don't remember the names, I will have to go and get them, but what he didn't show, what he did not show, was any command in this book to follow hadiths. He quoted a phrase that said obey Allah and the Prophet, which concurs with that when a decision is made by Allah and the Messenger, you obey it. But that means that Muhammad is a partner with Allah in making decisions, and that is shirk.
Modern historians point to an undeniable fact. The first century of Islam is entirely silent when it comes to written hadith. There are no manuscripts, no official collections, and no evidence that Muhammad's sayings were ever documented or standardized during his lifetime or in the generation immediately after him. Islamic tradition itself speaks of a prohibition against writing hadith so they would not be confused with the Qur'an. As a result, the entire memory of the Prophet's words relied on oral transmission, an inherently unstable medium in historiography, highly prone to alteration and impossible to verify without textual oversight. The codification of hadith began much later, primarily in the Abbasid era, more than a century after Muhammad's death. It was during this period that figures like Malik, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Bukhari, and Muslim began collecting and filtering reports. This long temporal gap presents a major historical problem because there is no documentary bridge connecting the Prophet's 7th century statements to the 9th century written compilations. Many early traditions even depended on one or two key transmitters, such as Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, making the entire foundation of hadith look more like a post-event reconstruction than a direct transmission from Muhammad himself. The tension grows sharper when we consider the explosion in the number of hadith. The earliest collections contain only about 100 reports, yet 2 centuries later, the number had ballooned into the hundreds of thousands. Ahmad ibn Hanbal claimed more than 700,000 reports. Bukhari examined around 600,000 and accepted only about 7,000. Such extraordinary growth cannot be explained as natural development. It reflects widespread fabrication in an era of political rivalry when competing groups, Abbasids, Umayyads, Shia, Khawarij, Murji'ites, Mutazilites, and others, created prophetic sayings to legitimize their theological and ideological agendas. The fact that only about 1% of these reports were deemed authentic by Bukhari stands as internal testimony to the scale of the problem. If the vast majority of prophetic sayings turned out to be weak or fabricated, what emerges is not a preserved body of divine revelation, but a human tradition shaped by political, social, and theological pressures. The silence of the 1st century and the explosion of reports in the 3rd century together show that hadith, as a textual corpus, is far more a historical construction than an authentic record of the Prophet's words. The real question is not merely whether a hadith is sahih, but whether a tradition documented 2 centuries after the fact can reasonably claim the status of binding revelation for the entire community.